37. It really hurts how boundaries are built up and people are not using the common sense anymore, because we could have basically died out there in the storm just because of some new regulations about a virus, and no one is thinking that lives are at stake. Our motor is underwater and the battery is also underwater. I'm not sure if I can start the motor, but I will try.
Hello everyone and welcome to our first live update.
A lot of things happened. We got stranded, kicked out of countries, and yeah, coronavirus affected us quite heavily, more than initially expected. We're gonna tell you what really happened and how crazy the times are if you're living on a sailboat.
For all of those who follow us on Instagram or on Facebook, you may have seen some concerning images in the last weeks. How we got into trouble with the Coast Guard, how we had to call a PANPAN.
We got water in the boat.
We also got water in the boat, so a lot has been happening. And yeah, how finally we have been kicked out of Cyprus and are now on our way back to Italy. And we never really got the chance to sit down and tell you exactly what was happening. So now that we are in Anchorage, where we are allowed to stay and where we are hiding out from the strong-willed TV that is currently kicking us around, we decided to sit down and tell you the whole story without being afraid to getting some legal trouble in Cyprus.
So it all started back in Cyprus when we tried to sail from Zigi to Lachi. Like before we started, we called the Coast Guard and the harbour master, and they told us it is still allowed, even with Corona, to sail inside Crete. Like you are allowed to do
Cyprus.
that. Inside Cyprus, you're allowed to do that. And the laws are still not forbidding anything, like not sailing, not anchoring, nothing.
You might be wondering why in this critical situation we decided to leave port. The problem is that Zigi is only a small fisher port, so there was no electricity, which in our case means no warm water. And we knew we will be stuck for a while, so that's why we decided to leave, and as Michael said, it was still allowed, so we did it.
So we had to do quite some miles to get from southeast of Cyprus to the northwest of Cyprus, and the winds were not that favorable, so we had to sit out storm and heavy winds in a bay for like 3 days. Like we had to drop 2 anchors and had quite some fun doing that with 40 knots and the waves in another direction.
So while we were anchored there on the 3rd day, when we were finally ready to go on and to leave for Lachi, we were approached by the Coast Guard.
Big boat came with 2 helpful officers, and they said we have to get back to the harbour because anchoring and any sailing activity got forbidden in the last changes of the law. And yeah, that's what we did. We tried to sail north and approach Lachi.
On our way to Lachi, we were contacted by the Coast Guard of Lachi. You have to know those are 2 different districts. So before it was the Coast Guard of Paphos, now it was the Coast Guard of Lachi, who was telling us that we are not allowed to sail in Cyprus and that we immediately have to leave Cyprus.
Where should we go then? The Coast Guard in Paphos said we should come here.
Sir, you have to leave Cyprus. You have to leave Cyprus. Don't come to any port of Cyprus.
But we are coming from Cyprus, we are not coming from outside. And we cannot leave country because no one else is letting us in.
As you can imagine, that was quite a shock for us. So we called the Coast Guard of Paphos again.
Is it Coast Guard of Paphos? Yes, we are the Sailboat Fortuna. We have been in contact with 2 officers from the Coast Guard before they came to our boat. And they said we should go to Lachi, but Lachi said we cannot come there and we need to go to Paphos.
We then called the Coast Guard of Lachi, and they called the Coast Guard of Limassol, and it was just a calls. And after 3 hours sitting there in the sea, not going back and forth, we decided that the sun was setting soon, so we needed to get somewhere where we at least could anchor. So we went on to Lachi.
So finally we arrived at Lachi in the evening, and they said we are allowed to anchor there for 1 night, and they are gonna bring us provisions and fuel the next day, and then we need to leave. Like the next day we woke up and there's no possibility to go back.
It makes no sense for us to go back to Italy. We were staying in Cyprus already for 2 months, so we did not bring any kind of contamination to the country. So we decided to call the Italian embassy in Cyprus, and they were on our side and just said it makes no sense. We tried to contact the ministry and tried to get you into port.
So we were still anchored in front of Lachi, and we're not allowed to enter, and slowly the wind was building up, so it was the forecast was 40 knots, and
those 40 knots came along.
They came along like the whole day. Like we had to get up our anchor, and the waves came quite heavily, so like when Greta lifted up the anchor, the water was basically coming above the hull.
Standing in the sea.
Standing in the sea because the boat was like shaking up and down in 40 knots and 4-meter waves.
Also in this situation we tried again to call the Coast Guard, and we're trying to tell them it's getting really serious out here, we're getting into troubles, please let us in. I said there were 4-meter waves, and the wind was getting up to 30-35 knots. I think the max that we have was 38 even.
Yeah.
So they said no, and we had to stay out for about, I think we can see it on our navigation that we have been for 8 hours out there sailing back and front.
Motoring north and south, and half an hour north, half an hour south. The funny thing is that when we motored north, we went against the wind and against the waves, and it took us half an hour to get there with like maximum speed of the boat. We went like 1.8 knots, and when we turned around we were sailing like 7 knots without the motor. Like it was just the waves and the winds pushing us. And the tricky thing is the turning around, like the 2 points where you turn around. If the waves are too high, it is quite dangerous to get not capsized but a lot of water into the boat. And it was tough.
So the sun was setting again, another 24 hours had passed, and we still did not get any response from either the Coast Guard or the Ministry of Transport. The Embassy of Italy called us every half an hour to see how we were doing, and around...
Really nice guys.
Yeah, thanks for your help. It was
awesome.
Not only, it was a big moral help also to us. Yeah, after those scary 8 hours, it was actually the first time I was really, really scared on board. The wind finally had mercy on us and decided to calm down.
Yeah, like from 40 to 20 knots.
Yeah.
And the waves got like to 1-2 meters. We decided to anchor again and to sleep there 1 night before we hopefully get some information from either embassy, Coast Guard, something. We dropped the anchor.
Went to bed
in a super rolling boat. Was quite uncomfortable, and both got a bit seasick, and
I think it was also the whole exhausting and everything that really hit us there, and we were just happy to finally sit down and try to sleep a little bit, and then everything got worse.
Yeah. Our motor is underwater and the battery is also underwater. I'm not sure if I can start the motor, but I will try.
Okay, cut the start the machine to check your machine.
I will check it and will let you know. So I tried to get some water because we were thirsty, and the water we store in the bilge area, basically, the bottles. So I opened up there and it was full of water everywhere.
We found more water than he thought.
Yeah. So initially we thought, some of the water bottles broke by falling around or stuff like that. But after we got rid of the water, some more water came, and we were not sure what is happening. So I checked the motor, and also underneath the motor there was a lot of water. It was salt water, not sweet water. Yeah, the water got like everywhere in all the compartments, below the cabins, below the tanks, below the batteries. It was quite a big scary thing to see, and that's when we decided it is no way we can stay out here. It's way too dangerous, and we have to use PANPAN. I hoped I would never have to do that, but it was necessary, and we then were allowed to go into the harbor after half an hour. So we called the PANPAN. They let us wait out there half an hour to get confirmation from some other high tier in the ministry whatsoever. And then they finally said, yeah, you can come in, but they were still, yeah.
So yeah, they finally let us in, and let's just say it was not the most warm welcome we ever had in a port. They made us feel that we were not welcome there and that we were causing them a lot of trouble and a lot of work by entering the port right now. They helped us to anchor in front of the marine police station, so we would be observed 24/7, and we were not allowed to leave port. And yeah, so finally at around midnight, they finished questioning us and we could go to bed. So this was the situation back 2 or 3 weeks. So we were in port now and allowed to moor there until we fixed our motor problem, because we discovered that the water did enter in the boat because there was this vacuum ventil who didn't work as it should. During the first days, we were still in very close contact with the Italian embassy, and in the end also they got a no from the Ministry of Transport that we are not allowed to enter port or to stay in Cyprus. So we kind of realized that this was not a solution for us and that we had to leave Cyprus, so we started to prepare for leaving Cyprus.
Yeah, so a few police officers were very nice to us. They helped us with the groceries, and many thanks to that, like saved our asses. We got water, we got food, but still officially we were not allowed to be there, and they pressed every day that we need to leave. The tricky thing is that we were not allowed to go anywhere. Basically, like we called Greece, they said borders are closed, you cannot enter, and so on.
This was going to be our longest crossing ever. Until now we only had max of 2 days, and now we were speaking about 850 nautical miles, which if you look at an Atlantic crossing may seem not that long and easily doable, like everybody's doing with the Atlantic Ocean. But the problem here in the Med is that you don't have stable winds like you have on the Atlantic. So it's not one big wind who is bringing you there, but here there are a lot of winds that are crossing each other, and they're changing every day, especially in April.
So we were monitoring the weather situation and we found a window, and finally we're ready to start.
This was 5 days ago. 5 days ago we left harbour in Ziggy, and went
Laci.
for this. Oh yeah, Laci. So we left harbour in Laci and went for this journey. We managed to do our first 400 nautical miles.
Yeah, we went more or less halfway. We had a very heavy start. Like the wind was way worse than predicted.
Yeah.
So we had to fight again like 35 knots and like 3 meter waves. So Greta got a bit of seasick, and it was a very rough beginning. So we went from Cyprus to Castellorizo to Rhodes and then south to Crete.
And that's where we are currently, and now if we look at the prediction, there is about 3 or 4 days of very, very strong Maltemi. Yeah. So we're going to have to sit it out here. That's when we took the chance to talk to you. And that's it for now. That was our story of the last weeks.
But still a lot of things happened during our crossing here.
Doesn't hurt that much.
So yeah, we had some issues along this journey. We're going to explain all of those in one of the next episodes. For now, yeah, we're doing fine. We're waiting for the next weather window, which should hopefully be taking us to Italy. And we're just hoping that when we get there, they have not changed the laws again.
Yeah.
So wish us luck, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button.